We're opening up our country. Should have never been closed. Should have never been closed.
The guy literally went to the Supreme Court this past weekend and pleaded with them to allow him to let Americans starve.
This is Today as It Happened. Good Tuesday evening to you. I'm Holly Furfer here with your chronological look at the biggest events and stories of the day. From President Trump's Veterans Day visit to Arlington National Cemetery to a light at the end of the tunnel for the longest ever federal government shutdown. But first, let's take a look at some of our other top headlines of the day. President Trump sending a letter to the BBC threatening to sue the network for at least $1 billion. This comes after the British broadcasters admit that it made a serious error in judgment in the editing of a Trump speech on January 6, 2021 for a documentary about his campaign. Two top executives have already resigned from the broadcaster, and the network says it will respond after reviewing that letter. Overseas now, as Ukraine tries to beat back a Russian advance, President Volodymyr Zelensky says he wants to order 25 Patriot defense missiles from the United States. Russia is currently targeting Ukraine's power systems, leading to blackouts across the country. Zelensky says he knows it takes years to manufacture the systems, but he hopes other European countries will trade out with Ukraine and they'll wait for new ones to be built. No response so far from the United States. Families of those killed at Camp Mystic during this summer's catastrophic flooding are suing the camp's operators for failing to protect the campers and counselors. 27 people died during the flooding on July 4th, as the Guadalupe River rose from 14 feet to nearly 30 in just 1 hour. That lawsuit alleges the camp prioritized evacuating equipment over people. All right, on this Veterans Day, the annual wreath-laying ceremony at Arlington National Cemetery. President Trump, Vice President Vance are there, as well as the Secretary of Veterans Affairs, Doug Collins. So let's take you back there.
So I want to say thank you once again to every American veteran. You are very, very special people and always in our heart. Thank you very much, and God bless you, and God bless the United States of America. Thank you very much. Thank you, everybody. Thank you very much.
President Trump speaking at Arlington National Cemetery on this Veterans Day, honoring the veterans that have sacrificed for our country. Earlier today, laying a wreath at the tomb of the unknown soldier. Scripps News White House correspondent Jacob Garden-Schwartz live now at the White House. And Jacob, what did the president have to say on this Veterans Day?
Yeah, good afternoon, Holly. We really saw a lot of tradition and pomp and circumstance, as you noted, the laying of the wreath at the tomb of the unknown soldier, the Army band performing some of those songs that we all know and love. And the president's speech, really, especially for this president, was fairly boilerplate, honoring the sacrifice of those service members, both those who have fallen as well as those who continue to serve to defend our freedoms. And in contrast to most of the times when the president speaks, we really did not hear too much attacks on his enemies or conversation about politics, perhaps an acknowledgement of the sort of ceremony and importance of this Veterans Day observance today. Of course, that does not mean we didn't hear any of that. Indeed, the president commenting a little bit on some of the unique attributes of this Veterans Day in particular, this of course coming as we are still in the longest government shutdown in American history. The president touting what he described as a, quote, big victory with this deal to end the shutdown, thanking congressional leaders for pushing forward with that plan. Of course, as we know, that measure passing the Senate last night, House lawmakers expected to return to Washington to vote as early as Wednesday evening. And for many of those who were in the audience for the president's remarks, they are the folks who have been impacted by this shutdown. Active duty soldiers have been paid. They did receive their last paycheck late last month, thanks in part to the Trump Trump administration's ability to move some money around from different accounts. But it was very much an open question as to whether they would receive their next paycheck, set to be sent out later at the end of this week. So certainly, they are hoping that this deal goes through in time for them to receive their paychecks. The president also touting his approval rating with veterans, suggesting that he has a 92% approval rating with veterans. And he said, quote, "That's in contrast to certain previous administrations that we won't mention." So again, not necessarily taking the Biden administration on by name, though certainly referencing it. And also touching on some of the more controversial moves that he has taken with regard to the military, renaming or attempting to rename the Pentagon the Department of War as opposed to the Department of Defense, and also touching a little bit on some of those hot button political issues that he has been under fire for recently, namely affordability, talking about his administration's approach to bringing down energy prices, suggesting that Americans might start to see those impacts over the coming years, as of course Democrats have claimed that the administration has not done enough to bring down prices. As far as what else we have seen this administration, the actions they've taken with regard to Veterans Day, I was traveling with Vice President Vance yesterday over at Walter Reed Medical Center just outside D.C., where he was visiting wounded veterans, wounded soldiers who had been impacted or hurt in the line of duty and were receiving care there. Again, a fairly standard, stop by for the Vice President to show what the administration is doing for veterans. As you noted, Secretary Collins, Secretary of Veterans Affairs, among those who spoke during today's ceremony, he highlighted some of the administration's actions to try to improve veterans' health care through the VA. So overall, a fairly boilerplate and ceremonial speech from the president, though of course one that comes on this unique day as we are still amid this longest shutdown in U.S. history. Holly.
All right, Scripps News White House producer and reporter Jacob Garden-Schwartz live for us. Thank you for that update from the White House. Coming up on Today as It Happened.
That's a scary precedent that also needs to be corrected with legislation. No one person should have the right to mute the voices of 813,000 people.
Welcome back to Today as It Happened. Let's check back in on our daily briefing of today's top stories.
The precedent that Speaker Johnson has set in, having a person who was duly elected wait, 48 days before being sworn in, that's a scary precedent that also needs to be corrected with legislation.
When do you think the Epstein vote will happen?
Well, that's up to Republicans because they clearly have been engaging in a pedophile protection program over the last several weeks. It's insane that they've refused to swear in Representative-elect Adelita Grijalva. And we know that the reason why they've done it is because they're trying to hide the Jeffrey Epstein files from the American people. Those days are over. Because as soon as Representative-elect Adelita Grijalva is sworn in as the next Congresswoman from the great state of Arizona, she's going to sign that discharge petition, and Mike Johnson can no longer hide from this issue.
Arizona Congresswoman-elect Adelita Grijalva is expected to be sworn in as early as tomorrow, more than 7 weeks after she won a special election to replace her late father. House Speaker Mike Johnson refused to do so until the government shutdown was over. And while her vote will not count to end that ordeal, it is likely to be the deciding factor on another issue that has loomed over Congress. Scripps News national correspondent Alex Miller live in New York with the latest on this. And Alex, we're talking Jeffrey Epstein. His survivor spoke out on Capitol Hill in the beginning of September, pushing for a vote to compel the release of the government's files on this case. So it seems like with the addition of the Congresswoman-elect, could we see something happen soon?
Yeah, this is really the first time this is a possibility for Republican Congressman Thomas Massie to get that bill on the floor for a vote since Speaker Johnson has not allowed them to do so. You need 218 votes to circumvent the speaker. They've got 217, so Congresswoman-elect Grijalva is likely going to be that last vote there to make it happen. This bill would compel the Department of Justice to release the information that they have into the investigation of Jeffrey Epstein. Now, it is important to note that regardless of whether this gets a vote. It will likely pass the House since it already has 218 votes in support of bringing it to the floor. It would still need to go to the Senate. It would still need to be taken up for a vote in the Senate and pass, all of which are pretty unlikely. Then it would need to head to the president's desk and he would need to sign it. We know that he has recently been calling all of this a hoax, so that also is unlikely. And of course, there's not a veto-proof majority in all of this. So this is really just one vote that these survivors are trying to see, trying to get these mostly or nearly all Republicans on the record voting against the release of this information on this. And there's been scrutiny, obviously, as to why the Congresswoman hasn't been sworn in. And as you mentioned, Johnson says it's because the government has been shut down, not because of this vote, something Democrats have accused him of.
And Alex, the Speaker has pointed to the investigation being done by the House Oversight Committee as a thorough enough look into the Epstein files. But Congressman Jamie Raskin, the top Democrat on the Judiciary Committee, has now said he's getting information straight from the prison in which Epstein's longtime girlfriend and right-hand woman is being held. What can you tell us about this new information?
Well, this letter from Raskin comes on the heels of another letter just last week from the ranking member of the House Oversight Committee, the top Democrat on that committee. Raskin has some explosive allegations in this letter, which he wrote directly to the president. It's 6 pages, and it goes through essentially special treatment that they believe that they have heard from a whistleblower that Ghislaine Maxwell is receiving. Special treatment that includes not even being able to talk to her. According to this, the warden has threatened people that if they talk to her, they could be sent to another prison. I want to talk about some of this special treatment she is allegedly receiving. This includes customized and prepared meals by staff. Then those meals are being delivered by longtime federal employees. She's apparently being allowed to have private meetings with visitors in special cordoned off areas, and there snacks and refreshments are being provided. She's apparently her guests are allowed to bring computers, something that he calls a security risk to the prison. She's reportedly been given a puppy to play with because some inmates had been training service animals, and was reportedly asking for a puppy, and then being escorted personally to exercise areas so that she can work out alone. And she's also apparently been allowed to go into staff-only recreation areas. So in this letter and in the letter that we saw last week, there are some pretty serious allegations against Dr. Tanisha Hill, who is the warden of this facility. Remember, Ghislaine Maxwell was transferred to this facility this summer. It's a lower minimum security prison after she spoke with the Deputy Attorney General, Todd Blanche. So according to this letter, staff is being forced to wait on her, quote, hand and foot, something that they have said that they are sick of. There's apparently been retaliation against inmates or staff who have been questioning this treatment. And again, as I mentioned, threatening inmates to move them to worse facilities if they even try to speak with her. And apparently, according to this letter, the warden is acting as essentially a point of contact for Maxwell's mail. She's being allowed to have things emailed to the warden. The warden then prints them out for her. She can read them, make edits to some of these documents that she's receiving, and then the warden is the one who's sending them back to the sender. So, in prison, typically you're corresponding via snail mail. That mail often gets lost. So that in itself, obviously, special treatment as well. And so with all of this, Raskin is asking to have a public hearing with the Deputy Attorney General, Todd Blanche, to ask him about his meetings with Maxwell, because during the interviews, supposedly she denied that Jeffrey Epstein ever had underage girls on his property, that she ever saw him engage in any inappropriate interactions with underage girls. And she criticized the allegations made by the late survivor Virginia Giuffre against Prince Andrew. She said those did not happen either. She used much more colorful language, apparently, in that interview as well. And so he's asking for this meeting. He also asked the president directly if there were any conversations happening about commutations, whether she's going to have her sentence commuted. The president has a couple of weeks to answer all of this, unlikely rather, that Raskin will get an answer from the president or any of his lower level officials on this, but just putting on the record there that we are seeing some real special treatment, apparently, according to a whistleblower, for Maxwell while she's at this prison in Texas, which, by the way, sex offenders are not supposed to be allowed even to be at minimum security prisons.
All right. Scripps News national correspondent Alex Miller live for us in New York. Thank you for that update, a story that we will follow with you. We appreciate it. And now let's take a look at some of our other top headlines of the day. President Trump asked the Supreme Court to throw out a $5 million jury verdict finding he sexually abused writer E. Jean Carroll. Trump's lawyers called Carroll's claims a politically motivated hoax and criticized the trial's judge evidence rulings. Carroll testified Trump attacked her at a Manhattan department store in the mid-1990s. The jury also found Trump liable for defaming Carroll when he denied her allegations in 2022. A new study shows veterans can buy homes on average more than 4 years sooner using VA loans. The report from Realtor.com and the National Association of Realtors finds 74% of first-time VA loan users put zero money down. That compares to a 12% median down payment for conventional loans. What does that mean for veterans buying a home? Well, a typical $430,000 home, conventional buyers need about $51,000 up front that VA loan buyers do not need to save up for. This study shows VA loans can help buyers get into homes up to 10 years sooner, depending on the market. Despite those benefits, only about a third of veterans know that they can buy a home with no money down. A Utah judge has blocked a Republican redistricting plan that would have reshaped 2 districts within the state. The judge ruled the map violated a 2018 ballot measure requiring nonpartisan redistricting. The court's decision creates a Democrat-leaning district around Salt Lake City, giving Democrats a better chance to win a congressional seat in a state that has not had Democratic representation since 2021. Coming up on Today As It Happened, President Trump floated the idea of sending $2,000 to most Americans thanks to revenue from his wide-ranging tariffs. Stay tuned for Scripps News correspondent Stephanie Liebergen's reality check on tariff rebates. That's straight ahead.
Would $2,000 help ease the pain and suffering from the 42-day government shutdown? The White House is actually banking on it. President Trump claims the U.S. is bringing in trillions of dollars from tariffs. As a result, the president has suggested most Americans could receive $2,000 dividends. Scripps News Washington correspondent Stephanie Liebergen is in our D.C. newsroom. And Stephanie, what is the president talking about? Could we all see those $2,000 payments?
Well, it certainly sounds like a great thing, I'm sure, for a lot of people right now. This is something the president had, an idea he's been floating really for the last couple months. But he put out a couple posts on Sunday and on Monday on his Truth Social talking about these $2,000 payments. So I want to look at his Monday post where he specifically says the $2,000 payments would be made to low and middle income USA citizens. Now, we don't know exactly where that line would hypothetically be. But apparently the White House has at least looked into the numbers a little bit. That's something that Kevin Hassett, the director of the National Economic Council, told some of the folks, including our own Haley Bowl of the White House just yesterday. Take a listen.
When we studied the matter in the summer, that we thought that deficit reduction might be the best use of those monies, but we've had a big surge in tax revenues. You've seen even a bit surplus in the latest monthly Treasury report. And because of the surge in tax revenues, I think that's a position that Congress and the President are reconsidering.
Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent was also asked about this over the weekend on ABC's This Week on Sunday, and he seemed to put a little cold water on the idea, saying that the $2,000 could come in a variety of forms, saying it could be in the form of maybe tax decreases from the One Big Beautiful Bill that the president signed over the summer. So according to Bessent, it might not be a $2,000 direct deposit or $2,000 check in the mail, but it is at least something, Dell, that the president has floated a couple times. So at least someone over at the White House is looking into this as a potentially trying to make it a reality.
Stephanie, going back to my teenage years, I remember writing checks where there was not enough money in my account. But that's a different story. Is there enough money in the government from these tariffs to make those 2,000 payments a reality?
So the president has repeatedly said that the country is taking in trillions of dollars in tariffs. And over the course of a decade, the country would be able to if all of these tariffs remain in effect. But all we have right now is some Treasury Treasury Department specific data for the fiscal year of 2025. So the total amount of tariffs the country took in over the last fiscal year that ended at the end of September was $195 billion. Now, that is all tariff money coming in, and the president's tariffs were only in effect for about 6 months of that time. So that number is expected to be $300 billion if the president's tariffs were in effect for the full year. Now, could those $300 billion support these $2,000 payments? It's really hard to know right now without any of the details. Where exactly would that line be for low income versus middle income? Who exactly would qualify? Is it $2,000 per household? Is it per adult? Does it include kids? There's a lot of questions that would need to be worked out before we would really be able to know if the tariff income could support these kinds of payments. The Committee for a Responsible Federal Budget crunched the numbers based on the COVID economic impact payments that we had 3 different rounds of in 2020 and in 2021. And if it's anything like the COVID payments, they estimate it would cost $600 billion for one round of these $2,000 payments, which is way more than the country is taking in tariff revenue. But they also warned that a sudden $2,000 payment, while it sounds great, it could actually have some negative impacts on the economy. Take a listen.
For a family of 5, this is $10,000. What we saw last time is they took it straight to the car dealership, right? And that's why we saw the car prices rise first and everything follow. There is a risk that we have these tariffs that are supply constraining and they're boosting prices. And then we send people this $2,000 and they spend it. And it leads to a bit of an inflation spiral.
If these $2,000 payments were to become a reality, in all likelihood, it's something that would have to start with Congress and then make its way to President Trump. So I don't think anybody can expect a $2,000 check showing up in the mail anytime in the next few days.
And that's assuming the Supreme Court doesn't rule against those tariffs. Our Washington correspondent,
Exactly.
Stephanie Liebergen. Stephanie, as always, we thank you very much.
You're watching Today's It Happened. Back in a moment. We're glad you're back with Today As It Happened. I'm Holly Furfer, here with your daily rundown of today's top stories.
A new study revealing pregnant women face a 37% higher risk of being shot and killed than non-pregnant women. Researchers looked at more than 7,000 homicides across 37 states from 2018 to 2021. They found homicide is the leading cause of death for pregnant women. The gun was also used in nearly 80% of those cases. Studies showing states with higher gun ownership rates have more pregnancy-related homicides. Black women were the most victims, nearly 58% of those who were shot and killed. Searching for victims after a Turkish military cargo plane with 20 people on board crashed in Georgia. It happened earlier near the border with Azerbaijan. President Erdogan and other officials signaling that at least some of those aboard are believed to be dead. The C-130 plane went down on its way back to Turkey. Fresh signs that the labor market is getting weaker as the government shutdown nears its end. Private employers shed an average of 11,250 jobs a week in late October. Economists say that job growth isn't strong enough to keep unemployment from rising. The Fed will consider that data when it decides on interest rates again next month.
We desperately need leadership to stand up to Donald Trump. And it's certainly not leadership when Trump and the Republicans are close to caving here. He has them over a barrel. I mean, Trump just a few days ago, said that the election losses last Tuesday were in large part because of the government shutdown. That's pretty obvious to a lot of Americans.
Day 42 of the government shutdown with just a sliver of hope. The Senate last night passing legislation to reopen the government. The longest shutdown in U.S. history now is one step closer to ending, but 42 days later, we could still be waiting a few more days for the House to return from recess to vote on that legislation. Scripps News congressional correspondent Nathaniel Reed is live on Capitol Hill. And Nate, how much frustration is there building now among Democrats that this bill passed last night and now is headed to a House vote as soon as tomorrow that doesn't address health care?
A lot of frustration. Democrats are absolutely pissed that this bill does not include anything for those expiring Affordable Care Act subsidies. And look, it was in the end about 8 Democrats who broke party ranks to vote in favor of this bill to pass it through the Senate late last night. They've now started that 36-hour clock for members of the House of Representatives to return to Washington. First votes expected as soon as 4 p.m. tomorrow, Dell, which means the House of Representatives will be back in Washington for the first time in almost 55 days. Crazy to say, the longest period of time they've been out of Washington without any votes in modern American history, according to some sources. And again, a lot of questions about how quickly they'll be able to process this government funding bill. But Democrats are extremely irritated with their colleagues for taking the issue of health care and being willing to pass a bill that all it does is guarantee a vote on expanding the subsidies, extending the expanded subsidies at some point before the middle of December. No guarantee on a similar vote in the House of Representatives. Here's Senator Ruben Gallego late last night.
I'm frustrated for the people of America, the 24 million Americans that are potentially going to see their premiums increase. I hope my colleagues earnestly are correct that we're going to be able to still land this plane and make sure that 24 million Americans don't see their premiums double.
Do you think this now shifts to becoming a campaign issue for 2026?
Well, affordability is always going to be a campaign issue. When elected officials willingly raise their insurance premiums to 24 million Americans, they're going to have to answer for that. And that's exactly what's going to happen if Republicans take no action between now and December 15th.
I want to note again, just to underscore, Del, that there is no similar guarantee to hold a vote in the House of Representatives. House Speaker Mike Johnson has been resistant since the shutdown began to agree to hold any vote on any sort of compromise between Democrats and Republicans. Ultimately, he will be holding a vote on this bill to reopen the federal government, but there's no similar agreement that we know of in the House of Representatives to hold a vote on extending those Affordable Care Act subsidies, meaning even if the Senate acts to try and extend those subsidies for a year or more, there's no guarantee that'll ever come up for a vote in the House of Representatives. And furthermore, we do not know whether President Trump would be willing to sign such an extension into law, meaning those higher premium prices that so many Americans are seeing. My colleague Maura Barrett doing this series on premium pain, the pain Americans are feeling from those higher costs, those likely not going away even as the open enrollment is set to end in just a few short weeks.
Nate, if we learned anything over the last 42 days, it is that this pain is being felt across red states and blue states. Are you getting a sense that the midterms could really wind up being about affordability and now health care?
Absolutely. I think we saw the off-year elections were heavily about affordability and the cost of living. President Trump arguing on Truth Social that the cost of living has gone down, that prices are going down. That largely appeared to fall on deaf ears in terms of voters who turned out at the polls last week. But the issue of the Affordable Care Act and the rising price of health care, something that Republicans say is pinned squarely on Democrats. But the reality is the midterm elections, typically a referendum on the party that's currently in power, and that's the Republicans. Here's my exchange with Senator Eric Schmidt, a Republican from Missouri, a close ally, of course, of President Donald Trump. If Affordable Care Act subsidies aren't addressed by Republicans in either this Congress or by President Trump, are you concerned that could be a massive liability in the midterm elections?
I think the Democrats have a lot to answer for. Obamacare has been a disaster. They did it without a single Republican vote. They didn't negotiate it. They did it by reconciliation.
With respect, are you concerned that voters will just blame the party in power? They won't know the nuance of how their health care prices got more expensive?
That's what elections are for. I think people know that Democrats own Obamacare, and it's been a disaster.
Just a reminder, Del, those midterm elections less than 1 year away. Obviously, health care is something the Democrats have tried to make center stage during this now over a month-long government shutdown. A lot of questions about whether voters will remember that when they go to the polls next year to elect a majority in the House of Representatives and possibly in the Senate as well. Democrats really hoping that the issue of health care is going to be center stage for many Americans who are looking to make clear how they feel about the last 10 months or so, but by then 2 years of the Trump administration.
I'm sure they will let Congress know how they feel come January 1st. Scripps News congressional correspondent Nathaniel Reed for us on Capitol Hill. Nate, as always, we thank you. Lawmakers on Capitol Hill have signaled an end may be near, but millions of you are still bearing the brunt of the political fighting. Shutdown negotiations now coming as the Trump administration is still fighting in the courts over SNAP payouts. Lower courts say the government must keep full payments flowing, but the Trump administration is asking the Supreme Court to keep them frozen for now. Scripps News White House correspondent Haley Bull is live on the North Lawn for us. And Haley, what do we know at this hour?
Well, Del, millions of Americans are waiting to see how the Supreme Court rules in this case. The government does not want to be compelled to issue full SNAP benefit payments, while nonprofits bringing the suit want the court to allow that lower court order to continue. Now, the government, in its filing to the high court, is challenging the lower court's authorization and reasoning in ordering the payments in full, writing in a filing that the, quote, district court's unlawful orders risk upsetting that compromise and throwing into doubt how innumerable critical federal programs will be funded, a point on the equities that escaped the Court of Appeals. But nonprofits today are disagreeing in their own filings to the court, calling it a mischaracterization, writing that the, quote, government's remaining claim of irreparable harm, that the district court's orders are interfering with negotiation tactics in the government shutdown, only confirms what has been clear all along, that the government is leveraging SNAP to gain partisan political advantage in the shutdown fight. This court should not participate in that effort. Now, both those nonprofits and the states who have weighed in point to the logistical challenges the initial government's commitment of partial payments of SNAP benefits by the government has created, pointing to confusion, chaos, and a delay in distribution. Parallel to this, Dell, at the same time, a Massachusetts judge this week kept an order in place blocking USDA from reversing SNAP funds states may have already spent when it came to their efforts for full authorization. Bottom line here, though, is millions of Americans are relying on food benefits, and how much is dispersed by the government remains entangled in the courts while the government still remains shut down despite the progress we have seen over the past couple of days, Dow.
Scripps News White House correspondent Haley Beauforce live on the North Lawn. Haley, as always, we thank you very much.
Up next on Today's It Happened.
This was at the beginning of the shutdown, but if you look at it now, the number that are blaming Democrats in November has gone up about 8 points.
You're watching Today's It Happened, Scripps News rundown of the biggest events and stories of the day. So let's jump right in.
We're joined right now by Scripps News political director Andrew Rafferty. And Raff, this was a 42-day political dogfight. It ain't over yet. Right. The question is who won or who is winning, I guess, is the way it should be phrased.
Right, and we look at this through the political lens, or at least I do here in Washington, in my perch as somebody who is looking at electoral politics. Of course, we have done a very good job talking about the people who are impacted, and certainly the people who are feeling like potential winners today are those with the SNAP benefits, right, and those maybe who are traveling this Thanksgiving. Politically, though, there is enough for both sides to sort of hang their hat on to say that they got some sort of victory. I think the easiest sort of case to be made would be Republicans, because this was a deal that was on the table months ago. They did not include those ACA subsidies, which we have talked so much about in this, only a promise at a vote of a later date. If you are a Democrat, though, you look at the elections that happened last week, where Democrats did exceedingly well, historically well, though in a limited number of races, one of them, of course, being near where we are in Virginia, which was greatly impacted by the government shutdown, and, of course, in New Jersey as well. Then, of course, you got those SNAP benefits funded as part of this guarantee, a limit in that reduction in a workforce that we know was so important to those federal workers, and we saw the Trump administration continue to eye as the shutdown went on, and then a promise for an ACA vote. I do think that some of the more moderate members, those 8 senators who ultimately broke with party ranks and supported Republicans, saw something that isn't getting talked about along the what's that?
No, you said polling.
Yeah, polling, exactly. And so if you look at sort of how Americans' perceptions of this have changed throughout, it is really interesting, because there was a growing number of Americans who, as this was going on, an increasing number, this was at the beginning of the shutdown, but if you look at it now, the number that are blaming Democrats in November has gone up to about 8 points, whereas the number for Republicans is about the same. The number of blaming both parties is about the same. So look, I think for those 8 senators, they saw what was happening in our airports, what was happening from people in their communities who were worried about where their next meal would come, and they essentially said, this is the best we're going to do. And there is the potential that if this goes on, then everyone is essentially being thrown into this obstructionist bucket and that could end up sort of reversing any sort of gains politically that they made over the past 40 plus days.
As they say in television, but wait, there's more. We've got January now. I mean, this is only kicking the can down the road, so to speak, with regards to health care. So now who is going to be facing the pressure as these premiums start to tick up?
Well, certainly both parties, but I think you can see that it would be more squarely on Republicans because this is something that the Democrats have really become champions of. This idea of extending these subsidies, and these are subsidies that, of course, were put in place during the pandemic. But once people continue in the open enrollment process, which we know is now open for most, seeing those premiums in some states going up astronomically. There is no denial, well, I shouldn't say no denial, but there is language coming from Republicans that something needs to be done. It is the solution that is most of debate. And now you hear the GOP talking about, well, we don't want to just extend these subsidies. We want to do our own thing or come up with our own health care plan. And historically, Del, you know very well that that has not panned out. Republicans have not been able to coalesce behind a plan, which, of course, ultimately culminated in that John McCain thumbs down when there was, during the first Trump administration, this plan to repeal Obamacare without a clear replacement.
Are both parties missing the boat when it comes to this entire issue, which is it's not just the affordability of the ACA, it's also the SNAP benefits, it's also the air traffic. I mean, this is something that affected everybody, and everybody was complaining. So was it actually in the Democrats' favor to stop fighting?
Well, I think when you talk about affordability and this idea of who cares most for the everyday American, Democrats traditionally have not been as strong as Republicans on that issue. We saw Donald Trump about a year ago being able to talk about affordability and bringing costs down, being better on the economy. That's a large part reason why he was able to defeat Kamala Harris. Because of Democrats' sort of messaging around, we'll put the airports aside, but certainly SNAP benefits and the ACA subsidies, you talk to a lot of Democrats here in Washington, and they feel that they now have more leverage or are being able to resonate on this issue in a way that they haven't in a long time. Now, we're still a year away from the midterms, and
You're kidding.
you know, we could talk about it every day, though. Maybe it'll bring it a little bit closer. But I hesitate to overanalyze any event that happens this far out.
Right.
But of course, Del, beginning of next year, we're going to see some Democratic primaries, Republican primaries, and I think this could still play into it. And with the point that you just brought up, we're going to do this all again in the end of January.
Scripps News Political Director Andrew Rafferty. Raph, as always, thanks.
Coming up on Today as It Happened.
Flight cancellations added up for a fifth day in a row as the government shutdown continues. Some airports are being impacted more than others.
That story right after the break. Welcome back to Today as It Happened. I'm Holly Furfer. All right, let's jump right back into our rundown of the top stories of the day.
The Southeast getting smacked by cold air and freezing temperatures. 18 million people from Alabama to Florida now under freeze warnings. Several places in Florida setting records. It was 28 degrees in Jacksonville. Tourists headed to Walt Disney World in Orlando. They had to deal with temps in the 30s and wind gusts up to 35 miles an hour. Up north in the Great Lakes, snow and lots of it. 2/3 of the country in the direct shot of that Arctic air. My Heart expanding its recall of baby formula to all cans sold nationwide because of botulism. The FDA saying 84 babies have become sick with the bacterial disease since August. 36 consumed that infant formula, with more than a third receiving By Heart products. All of the infants were taken to the hospital, but no deaths have been reported. Parents, they say, should stop using By Heart formula and throw it away. Infant botulism causes constipation, poor feeding, drooping eyelids, and breathing problems in babies under 1 year of age. There are signs here in Washington that we are now close to an end of the government shutdown, but this is day 42 and no popping of champagne corks at the nation's airports. Flight cancellations and delays are showing no signs of easing, at least not yet. Today, that mandatory percentage of flights affected ticks up from 4 to 6%. Scripps News investigative reporter Patrick Terpstra has been tracking the impacts on the travelers. And Patrick, what have you found?
Well, today has been going better than yesterday. 1,200 flight cancellations so far, but there's a reason that flights are cheaper on Tuesdays and Wednesdays. Fewer people travel on Tuesdays and Wednesdays, so the airlines are saying that there's a little bit of natural relief there for the air traffic control system, but still 1,200 flight cancellations as of today. The big pain point seems to be New York LaGuardia Airport, but this is what it looked like yesterday. Look at all of these flight cancellations across the country. These are places where more than 10% of flights were canceled, 18% in New York City, 24% in Chicago, both O'Hare and Midway. Just a lot of issues there, along with weather, making things even worse yesterday. So in total, over 2,000 flights canceled yesterday. But the FAA says that they still see the potential for even more problems because they're going to have to ramp up the scale back of flights to 6% today. It had been 4%, all the way up to 10% on Friday. This to accommodate fewer air traffic controllers showing up to work. A number of them saying that they're taking second jobs. They've been working without pay in these control towers for weeks now, more than a month. President Trump ordering them back to work, saying that he'll give bonuses of up to $10,000 for those that do show up. But the fact remains, this is a system that has remained under strain. And even though the shutdown may be ending soon, it could take a while for things to get back up and running. But I talked to one expert today, and she told me that just the talk of this end of the shutdown could be a good thing. It could offer encouragement and incentive for those air traffic controllers to return. Take a listen.
The fact that the government shutdown is ending will definitely be a welcome sign to everyone involved, right? Because it means that they will get their pay and their back pay, and it is a recognition of the importance of the work that they do.
One thing that we're going to have to wait to see is the Secretary of Transportation, Sean Duffy, says that 15 to 20 controllers have been retiring every day as the shutdown goes on. That's triple the number. What does that do to the system? It's a question we've been seeking to answer. So far, no data that we've been able to find that really spells out exactly how many people have quit and left the ranks of air traffic controllers, but they need every single person they can get. This is an air traffic control system that has been short thousands of controllers, Del, for more than a decade, really under strain right now.
And Patrick, this isn't, I hear this over and over again. It's not like flipping a switch and turning the airports back on. I'm understanding it could be days before things get back to normal. What are you hearing?
Well, that's what the airlines are warning people. They're saying that even if the government were to reopen tomorrow, it will take time for these schedules to get back to normal. They've got to position airplanes where they need to go. They've got to make sure their flight crews are in the right spots. A number of them have been reaching the maximum amount of time that they're allowed to work on a given day. They set these schedules in advance. They have to give people enough time to know what is happening with their flights. So they're saying, give it a few days. If the government reopens tomorrow, it could be the end of the week before things get back to normal. But the good news there is, Del, the holidays, Thanksgiving is still a couple weeks away. Maybe things will be normal by then.
And I won't bring up what it was like last year this time. And there's also the weather, which I understand could be problematic. Scripps News investigative correspondent Patrick Terpstra. Patrick, as always, thank you very much.
Thank you for joining us on Today As It Happened. I'm Holly Furfer. We hope you have a great Tuesday night. And to our veterans, thank you for your service on this Veterans Day and every day.